Hey everyone, it's Chirpy, your favorite rogue here, and in this video, I'll be showing you how to do Azure vaults as a Subtlety rogue. Now, if you don't play Subtlety rogue, there's a lot of information in this video that you can still use to maximize your DPS through positioning, stops, and overall knowledge of how this dungeon works. So be sure to stay through till the end so that way you know exactly what you need to do to get this key done. If you like the video, be sure to like and subscribe for more guides like this. If you want to see the stream live where this key was originally aired, be sure to drop a follow to twitch.tv/chirpytv, and I hope to see you guys there soon. Now let's get on to the video. For my talent build here, I'm using Nimble Fingers instead of Gouge, and I'm running Fleet of Footwork. The reason I don't run Gouge in this dungeon is that if you go out of your way to stop a cast with for Piercing Shards, for example, and somebody else misses their stop, you're just putting yourself in the way of danger. So I really don't like running Gouge for that reason, in particular in this dungeon. We go into Subtlety, and everything else is pretty standard for our class tree. For our Subtlety spec tree, we go into Gloomblade, we take Shadow Blades, Black Powder, Secret Technique, Tornado, we work our way down these two trees, and then you also have the option of whether you want a second Vanish Charge for a little bit more DPS, or if you want to go into one of the defensive node options. The best defensive node option that you could probably take is Fade to Nothing, as it gives you 10% DR anytime that you enter Stealth, Vanish, or Shadow Dance. So this just makes you a lot more durable overall in a key, so if you don't need the second Vanish Charge for extra damage, Fade to Nothing is most likely your best choice. You get a little bit of movement speed as well, so that helps with moving out of swirlies and everything else that you need to do. For itemization, I am running the Flaring Cowl to go with my Seal of Diurna's Chosen for the fire proc. I have an Elemental Lariat with crit mastery on it. I'm running high mastery, low crit gems. If you don't have any other gem slots, make sure you're running a primary stat gem in one of these sockets as well. I have my 4 set. I'm running a cloak with crit mastery, engineering bracers with mastery on it, a crit mastery belt, a crit mastery boot, a crit mastery ring, Manic Grief Torch, Storm Eater's Boon, and for weapons I'm running 2 daggers. One's from Broodkeeper, and one is a Spark crafted dagger with crit mastery on it. I have Sophic Devotion on both of them, Avoidance on every piece I can take Avoidance, Waking Stats on my chest, Watcher's Loam on my boots, and Mastery Enchants on my rings. You see unbuffed, I'm sitting at 34% crit, 69% mastery, 11% verse, 9% avoidance. But I also do run Buzzing Runes, a File of Tepid Verse, and I have the Feast food buff as well, and you can see buffed stats, I have 38% crit, 15% verse. I have the Alchemical Flavor Pocket embellishment on my dagger, and this does not count as an embellishment slot, so it's very useful if you die with the food buff on. It does not get rid of your food buff, so you can keep that food buff for the entire duration of your key, even if you happen to get hit by a mechanic, or you fall over to rot, or anything like that. You don't have to stop and get another food buff, you can just keep that extra agility throughout the entire key. So it's a very useful extra little embellishment that you can put on any Spark crafted item that does not already have the embellishment on it. If you like the content, be sure to subscribe. It really helps me out and it's free for you. Thank you so much. Coming to this first pull, you can see I set my focus kick to star. I'm not setting all my buttons right away because I'm waiting for everything to group up, so I get a rupture out first, and then as soon as everything groups up, I send my boon and our shadow dance symbols, blades, everything else. I do lose a secret technique right in the beginning here because the mobs got pulled out of my range, unfortunately, so I lost a big portion of damage for not being able to spend a secret technique. I could have shadow stepped closer, but I didn't realize that they were so far out. So we want to be stopping the Piercing Shard casts on these Furies, as well as getting the Mystic Kicks on the Flower Boys. We get through this first pack, no issues, and we go on to this next area here. I set my focus target to star again to make sure that I am getting those Mystic Vapor Kicks. And we are setting up our ruptures here before we pull in the rest of the pack. I know that we are pulling more flowers in, so I'm waiting to send all of my buttons for them to come in. And as soon as they come in, I send my dance symbols and our full rotation. Once the Shadow Dance runs out, we start doing our maintenance, which is spreading our ruptures to as many targets as possible before our next Shadow Dance window. I mess up here and I send my Tornado after my dance. I should have sent my Tornado first and then gone into dance, but we only lose one finisher out of it, so it's not the biggest deal in the world. You can see we're still doing over 200k DPS regardless. And then when we get our dance back up, we're just sending it again immediately. We get our full value out of our dance here. And this is just something that comes with time, knowing whether you're going to get the full usage of your CD or not in a pack. So whether you should send it or whether you should hold it. Most of the time, you're just going to be sending it on cooldown regardless. But if you only are going to get like 2 globals out of your Shadow Dance, you probably just end up holding it. We go into this next pull, which is a pretty big one. We're pulling the tree pack in with all these other guys. And we're doing our maintenance, getting some ruptures up before we send all of our cooldowns, because we get more value out of it when everything's grouped up. So once everything's grouped up, we are sending in our secret technique and everything else for our Shadow Dance rotation. Once that runs out, again, we're just doing our maintenance. You can see I'm using my mouse over macro to get ruptures on as many targets as possible while waiting for our next dance to come up. Here, I send my tornado and my dance again to get more burst out and finish off these mobs. I should have been targeting the Crystal Thrasher here, because it is the highest prio target. I don't know why I was targeting a flower, to be honest, but you want to be targeting the Crystal Thrasher here and then CCing the other mobs. So either with a focus kick, or with your mouse over blind, mouse over kidney shot macros, anything like that. Very important to stop as many piercing shards here as possible, as well as make sure that the Mystic Vapor casts do not go off. It puts a very nasty dot on your team, and makes it very hard for your healer to keep everybody alive. As we finish off this pull, we get ready to jump down over this balcony to start gathering up all the tenders and the saplings. The boss will spawn after all the tenders are killed here, and ideally you have 1 melee kick every tender, or you can have 2 ranged rotate on one of the tenders if you're not running triple melee. Very important to stop these casts, because if they go off on one of your team members, it roots them in place and they could get stuck in a swirly, and that could be death. You can dispel it, but if anybody else is in the circle range, once the cast goes off, it will root them as well. So you'll dispel one person, and then you'll have to dispel everybody else at the same time, and it's very not good. We get onto the boss fight, and this boss fight isn't too bad. It's probably the best designed boss fight in this dungeon, I would say. So we're just trying to get as much damage on this boss as possible while the tank lines up the frontal cast to break as many trees as possible. If any trees are left up after the stomp and after the team gets to clear it, then you're going to probably need to pop a pretty decent defensive, because the more trees that are left up, the more damage the consuming stomp will do. So here, we just get as much damage as possible during our Shadow Dance window, and then we come over to position to clear some trees. You want to use your Tricks of the Trade here to make sure your tank gets all the aggro of the saplings, very important. And you could use your boon here like I did, but make sure that you have Cloak available if you do, because I did not have it available, and I thought I did, but I used it on the previous pull, and I ended up inting and dying there. I usually don't use Cloak on the previous pull, so just out of habit, I sent my boon anyways. But luckily we had a B-res. That was completely my fault. Only use Cloak on this, only use Boon on this fight if you have Cloak available for the saplings, because that will happen if you don't. But I get to reset my Grief Torch. That's pretty cool. Once these mobs come in, we start AoEing them down. The saplings deal decent amounts of damage, so you could, if you have a lot of spread damage on your team, you could just be funneling eviscerates into the boss. But I see that where our damage isn't super high on this boss, so I'm just trying to black powder these down to make sure that we're not taking excessive damage for no reason. On this consuming stomp, I use my Cloak just to stay alive and take 0 damage. Ideally, you could also just be using your Feint, assuming no trees are left up, and Feint should be able to keep you alive through the consuming stomp. You don't want to use the defensive when you are clearing the trees on that AoE circle, because you need it for that consuming stomp. And if you use Feint on the circle, you will not have it back in time for the stomp. So very important that you save your Feint for that usage in particular. We don't use Tricks of the Trade on the tank frontal when he breaks the trees, because again, you won't have it for the bigger one, which is when your team is using it. So here I see that my team covers all the trees, so I don't need to be breaking anything, so I just go right in for the boss. We get another dance up, and we are AoEing all these down. Consuming Stomp comes in. I use my Feint to make sure I'm not taking excessive damage. And we keep on AoEing the mobs down. And the entire fight is just this on a cycle. Put damage on the boss. Tank clears some trees. Kill those adds. The team clears trees. Tricks of the Trade. Feint for the stomp, AoE everything down, everyone's happy, everyone goes home, and we kill the boss. And as you can see here, we're just going to speed it up to get through the rest of this because there's not much else to talk about for this fight. Just make sure that you are clearing as many trees as possible. If one is left up, that's when you would use your things like Zephyr or Rally, and maybe even your Cloak if more than one tree is left up, especially on a high Tyrannical key. The more trees that are left up, the more damage your group will take from the Stomp, which could often lead to just one-shot deaths if you don't have a defensive available. So as we finish the fight, we go through the door and down the stairs. We're about to do a very big pull, and you'll see the way that we approach it is not what you might expect if you're not experienced with this pull, but we don't break the whelps right away because we're pulling these two elementals in first. And if you go and pull these two elementals in first, it makes the pull a lot easier to manage. Instead of having to chain them in late, you can just mow everything down at once. The things you need to watch for on the elementals are the Waking Bane cast. So I set my focus target to Star to get ready to kick a Waking Bane, and I boon this pull as soon as it starts, and I have my cloak available for this AoE circle here. And then once our Shadow Dance is down, we spread our Ruptures to as many targets as possible using our using our mouse over Rupture macro, which you can get in my sub-guide video or on the Discord. And we make sure that we're trying to also stop as many Piercing Shard casts as possible. But we're rotating our AoE CCs on those, so I don't really have to look at those for now. We are waiting for our tank to call out if we need to stop one individually. So it's more efficient for the AoE CCs to go out here than it is for us to spend a kidney shot on one of the Piercing Shards. This because our kidney shot uses combo points and therefore we lose damage. However, it's not a bad idea to do it if a Piercing Shard cast is going to go off and you can stop it. Tank stays alive, that means everyone stays alive, and you can finish off the key. So don't be greedy with your CCs if you don't need to be, and make sure that you are doing as much as you can to help your tank stay alive. So we enter this ring here, and our tank goes to pull a patrol over to this other pack because we are trying to double up as much trash as possible. So we actually end up triple pulling this. We have Lust available, and I set my focus target to Moon for the Waking Bane. I know the tank has the Rune Sealkeeper, and we're doing our AoE rotation, running out of the circle, trying to get as much use out of our dance as possible while staying in range of everything, even though we have to run out of the circle. We're spreading our Ruptures outside of Shadow Dance, and then once we have Ruptures up, we're spamming Black Powders, waiting for our dance to come back up. And then once our dance is back up, we send it immediately, get our secret technique out, more powders, and we're just mowing down this entire pack very quickly, very efficiently. And again, we're using AoE CCs to stop most of the casts here. So we're going through our Incap Roar, Ursul's, Typhoon, and Intimidating Shout and Shockwave to get through all of these casts. And you can see our tank stays pretty much at full HP the entirety of the pull because we're able to stop all the casts. This is a dungeon where your tank will either hit the floor or your tank will take 0 damage, depending on how well you as a team are able to stop the casts. You can't rely on the tank to stop every single cast, and you can't rely on yourself to stop every single cast. It's just not feasible. But as a group, one person puts out a CC, then the next person does, and the next person does, and you're able to stop pretty much everything. Very important to make sure that you're also standing behind the Glacial Furies, or the Crystal Furies, sorry, just in case a cast does go off and you don't get hit by it. It's a very, very large range Piercing Shard cast, and you can see right there, I know that I'm in a poor position, so I send my kidney on that Crystal Fury to make sure a Piercing Shard cast doesn't go off and hit everybody across the ring. We come back to this other pool and we double it, and as soon as our buttons are available, we send everything, and notice our positioning here. We're hitting the main HP target while staying in between the other targets to make sure everything that we do is hitting both sections. So while we are focusing the Curator down, we're also making sure that we're able to cleave all the other mobs with our Black Powder. If we positioned poorly there, directly on top of the Curator, our Black Powder might not hit everything, same thing with our Shuriken Tornado. So positioning is very important to make sure you're maximizing your DPS throughout these pulls. Especially when the pulls don't have the mobs grouped completely on top of one another. Right here, I stay on the Unstable Curator a bit too long. I probably should have switched to the higher HP ones sooner, but it's not the end of the world. It only has 2 mil HP, and we're able to get through it pretty quickly anyways. after this pull, we follow our tank, and we are going down to the second ring. We have a lot of time to kill for our lust to come back up, so we're going to be clearing some more trash before we go into the boss area. These arcane constructs, you can see I labeled them as a brown color nameplate because they have frontals. So this helps me to stay aware of where the positioning is. If you want my plater profile, you can find it on the Discord in the BUQAAWulQAmRd and Addons channel, so go check that out. I set my focus target to the Rune Sealkeeper here, and I send my boon immediately on pull here. There's not a lot to really watch out for other than the little swirlies, but you can always cloak if you're standing in one, just like I did. I shadow step to stay in with my boon, and then I cloaked the swirly just to make sure I didn't get hit by it and die. We get our tornado up, we get our shadow dance up, and now we are just doing our full burst combo, sending powders, shadow strike, and secret technique. Once our shadow dance is done, again, we're just doing the simple rotation of making sure our ruptures are on as many targets as possible before continuing on killing the packs with powders and eviscerates. Once we're done that pull, we go over to this other pull. Our mobility is kind of bad right here because we don't have sprint up, and I can't get a re-stealth right away because of Grievous. And we don't have cooldowns here, so you can see how I start the pull off. I started off just by putting ruptures on the targets and getting as many combo points as well possible, and then once the ruptures are on the targets, that's when I start powdering until my shadow dance comes up. We're trying to get as many Dance Macabre stacks as usual, and we get up to 5 before we send our secret technique here, which puts us up to 6 for our last couple finishers. Again, we're just making sure we're running out of the circles and staying on the mobs as much as possible. We shadow step back in to stay as high uptime on the mobs as possible there. As we finish off the pull, we take the book over towards the second boss room. And you'll see how I approach my cooldowns here again. As we go into these guards, I know that he's chaining it, so I'm getting my ruptures up. I'm not using my shadow dance immediately here because I want to make sure I have everything grouped up for maximum damage. I send my symbols, and then right after I send my dance, and we start using all of our cooldowns here. So if we sent our shadow dance early on the 2 guards, we would lose a lot of AoE damage. So this is like where I'm trying to say, like in my sub guide, don't send all of your buttons immediately on cooldown based on the situation and the context of the pulls. So I would have lost damage overall if I sent my shadow dance immediately on just the 2 mobs, because I would have lost a lot of black powder AoE damage throughout when all 5 were grouped. So this is just something that you learn over time, and it's very important to learn the context of the pulls and the context of the dungeon that you are doing. And then, once we get our shadow dance back up again, we're just following the same basic gameplay loop of when you're in dance, spam powders, secret technique, shadow strike, to get as many Dance Macabre stacks, and out of dance, we are doing a maintenance of getting our ruptures up, making sure Slice and Dice stays up, and then we are also making sure that we powder afterwards when everything is already dotted up. This lieutenant takes less magical damage, so if you're playing with a heavy magic damage comp, it's very important that you as a rogue stay on this mob, and it also is the highest HP mob in the room, so it is your priority target. It's not stunnable or anything like that, and it also does a frontal with that Spell Frost breath. And you can see I walked into it. I couldn't really see the animation going through the stairs there, but it goes to the stairs apparently, so watch out for that. We keep chaining the mobs through this pull. None of these mobs are really dangerous for you as a DPS. They do have an ability called Ice Cutter though, and that does a lot of tank damage. So if you're able to stop that ability for your tank, you're really helping them out in making sure that they're taking as minimal damage as possible. You could also look at these Astral Attendants. They do an ability called Unstable Power, and that's where all these swirlies are coming from. So if you're able to use kicks or stuns or blinds, you're making it a lot better for your ranged and your melee in general, because you don't have to do as much movement if you don't have swirlies coming out. But every time that they get the Unstable Power cast off, you're creating more swirlies, so it makes the fight a little bit more hectic and creates more room for error. So that's something you could do if your group seems to be struggling with moving out of mechanics or anything like that. So this boss fight actually has some pretty interesting tech that you can do for the intermission to help get through it a little bit faster, and this is something you do with Subtlety. You'll see that when these mobs come out, whatever, we make sure we kick. You have to make sure you kick all the bolts that these guys do, especially on Tyrannical, because they absolutely truck. But look at how we position here for this mob. We get our Rupture on the mob, and it also gets Rupture on the mob behind us. So you need to try to position it in a way that you're close in towards the boss when you use your Rupture in between the two mobs that you are working on. And that way you can get Rupture on both targets. It is kind of tricky and a little bit risky because you make yourself be closer to the orbs when they spawn. So just be very, very aware there, and if you're not used to it right in the way, make sure you have Cloak up to react with Cloak if an orb spawns very close to you so you don't die. We use our CCs on these mobs sometimes as well to make sure cast goes off, so you'll see I throw kidney shots out here or there, and I set my focus target on the image. You want to be cleaving off the boss to kill the ad, because if you're spending all your time focusing the ads down, you're going to end up getting an extra intermission phase, and that's really not ideal. You can see here, I try to get the Rupture, but I don't get it on the second target. So it's very, very particular with the positioning, and if you're able to master that, you're going to be getting through the intermission a little bit faster, which can save people's lives, especially on Tyrannical Grievous week, where your healer is sweating to keep everybody up. We stay on the boss, we make our kick on the ad, and we are just cleaving off the boss while making sure that the ad dies. You want to make sure that the ad does 0 cast at all, because that can literally just one-shot somebody. Make sure you dodge the arcane orbs. We do lose a man here, but it's not the end of the world. We have another B-res up, and now we are in crunch time. We try to set up our Ruptures on the 2 targets, and we get it successfully this time between the 2 targets. So because we have our Rupture ticking on the one on the left, I decide to go to the mob on the right here, because I know that that one is just taking dot damage, and you know, we're trying to maximize the Rupture damage that we get. So if we went to the mob that we already spread our Rupture to, it would die faster, sure, but you wouldn't get as much value out of the Rupture that you got from splitting it between the 2 mobs. So when this mob spawns, we use our blind to CC it, so that way we don't have to watch it at all, and then we just finish off the boss, and we go on towards the 3rd boss. We're already at 100% trash, and we have 10 minutes left. This next boss takes around 4 to 4.5 minutes, and the last boss takes around the same. So to jump down here Subtlety, you have 2 options. You can either shadow step somebody who is already standing on the floor here, but I have a toy called the Stylish Black Parasol that I got from a quest in Revendreth and Shadowlands, and it gives you a slow fall effect. So we just glide our way down here with our umbrella. This boss follows a pretty simple rotation here. We get Frost Bombs, we place them on the sides, we run out of the Frost Bombs, do as much damage as we can. He does an ability called Icy Devastator, which pulses damage onto one target. And that is the entire cycle of this boss. Whenever he comes down from the intermission, you get as much damage as you can, and whenever he is up there, you stand in one of the domes to not get one-shot by the explosion. You also should be using your feint during the explosion to mitigate as much damage as possible, especially on Tyrannical week, because it does deal a lot of damage, and if you're not topped up, you can pretty much die just from that. You have a 2-second grace period to run out of the ice there when it pops on you ever since the nerf, and you see I got blocked off by an ice path on that last one, so I just shadow step over to one of my teammates, and that way we avoid taking any ticking damage before the explosion. For the Icy Devastator, you can cancel the cast by using your Vanish or your Cloak, but during the final cast before he goes up, which you can track with Big Wigs timers, you don't want to cancel it because you can get more damage out during the process if you don't cancel the cast. So it's only okay to cancel the cast if it is not the last one. So right there you can see I sat on the cast and took the damage anyways, even though I had Cloak up. And right there, I didn't see a swirly in the globe, so I got stuck by a thundering, and I ended up having my cheat death pop. Right here, I get the Bubble of Shame from our Mistweaver, and it probably just sent that on me as security because my cheat already popped, and we don't have a B-res up, so probably the good move. We don't really need defensives like that for many other things here. And we finish off this boss, and we go down towards the last boss. This last boss has a couple main mechanics. He phases at 75%, 50%, and 25%, and on each of those intervals, summons a bunch of shards that you need to kill, otherwise they explode and deal a massive amount of damage that is probably not livable for your team. So as we get into this pull here, you see I position all the way up here, and I use my boon immediately, because it's very hard to boon once the orbs spawn. They can just run into you, and you'll just fall over, or you need to waste your cloak or shadow step away, and that isn't really ideal. We need to use our shadow step for mobility on this fight because of the movement debuff. It does this knockback, which you could use your feint for to mitigate some of the damage if you're low, and then when these adds spawn, we go and we make sure that we get all of them down. I shadow step up to the hardened crystal, because only our tank is on it, and I help them finish it off. And then we're just trying to stay on the boss and push him down to 50% to get the next wave of crystals. You got to make sure that we dodge all the orbs here as much as possible, because those running through you will most likely be a one-shot. See, we get the hardened crystal here, and this is the only crystal that I will actually dot and get full rupture value out of, because I mean it has like 700,000 HP, as you can see, so it takes a little bit of time to kill it. We're making sure that we're keeping our ruptures up, we're keeping our slice and dice up, we're sending our dance on cooldown to get as much damage onto this boss as possible. Our timer's pretty good. I mean, we have 3 minutes left, and we only have like 30% of the boss left to kill. So as long as we don't die and wipe out here, we are good to go. So we just need to make sure that we prioritize killing the crystals. The boss damage doesn't matter at this point. And we try to position as centrally as possible to these adds. And we shadow step up to the hardened crystal to help our tank finish it. And then we're just kiting around the room here. You see the orbs are chasing us down. They actually did change the orb logic now, so they're not supposed to hunt you down anymore, which happened after this key was filmed. So it's a little bit easier now without the orbs hunting you down and trying to mow you down. And just like that, we finish off the key. Here is my damage breakdown. We ended up topping the meters at 114k DPS overall. We have Black Powder at the top, Rupture, Secret Techniques, Shuriken Storm, Eviscerate, Melees, Manic Grief, Torch, Storm Eater's Boon, Gloomblade, Shadow Strike, Rupture, Shadow Blades, Lingering Shadow, Instant Poison. So, hope you guys liked the video. Be sure to like and subscribe if you did. And I hope to see you guys next time. Thanks for watching.